In my recent video about foil cut lines, I talked a little bit about how foil cards were made, and I showed you a glimpse of some foil test prints. I'll put a link to that video in the video description below here in case any of you want to go back and watch it. I received several requests for a better look at those foil test print cards, so that's what we're going to go over in this video. Now, the first foil card released from Magic was a pre-release promo for Urza's Saga, and that card was called Lightning Dragon, and that was around the end of September 1998. And that was the only foil card for Urza's Saga. The rest of the set didn't have any foils. It was the set after that, Urza's Legacy, that had regular foils for all the cards. But before any of that could happen, Wizards of the Coast had to develop the process to create foil cards. And they did that in the summer of 1998 using the Exodus cards, which is the set before Urza's Saga. So we're going to back up in time here to Exodus. Exodus was done and had been released, and that was the most recent set, and Wizards of the Coast wanted to make some foil cards. So they started off by using these print files for Exodus that they already had. They were already existing. And they used those to test different foil processes. And they went through a lot of different tests before they settled on what they really wanted to do. We're just going to look at one of those tests today. I might go over the other ones in the future in another video and do a more thorough covering of the evolution of foil testing, but today we're just going to look at this one test series. So here is the sheet for the Exodus foil test prints. This is one of the sheets. This is the one we're going to be talking about today. Now, in addition to the Exodus cards on this sheet, there's also one card from Visions. And the reason for that is because Exodus did not contain any multicolor cards. So they wanted to make sure they tested a multicolor card to see how it would look, and they went back to Visions. It was a Pygmy Hippo is the one they chose to work with. So all these cards here are Exodus cards except for the Pygmy Hippo, which is from Visions. Now on this sheet, you can see there are 8 cards across, and there are 9 rows. Now the interesting thing about this sheet is that every card on the sheet is subtly different. It may look like they're in columns of 9 copies of the card, but each one of those is a little bit different, and here's how they're different. So the first 3 rows have this +1 number at the right-hand side, just to the right of the artwork in the card frame. Rows 4, 5, and 6 have a -1 number there. And rows 7, 8, and 9 have just a 1 with no plus or minus. I'll talk more about what that number means here in a minute. But the other differences on the sheet are for rows 1, 4, and 7, the entire card surface is foiled. For rows 2, 5, and 8, there is no foil in the text box of the card. And for rows 3, 6, and 9, there is no foil in the text box or in the art box. Rows 1, 2, 3, and 4 do not contain expansion symbols, while rows 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 do contain their appropriate expansion symbols of Exodus or Visions on the Pygmy Hippo. Row 3 is particularly interesting because the white text on that row is not actually white. It's just the foil shining through from below. With all those combinations of different features for each row, it makes it so that no card on this sheet is like any other card on this sheet. Everyone's just a little bit different. On top of that, although these printing plates were used for other foil test prints, this sheet is the only one that has this particular pattern of foiling on it. That foiling was on the sheet before the printing was applied to the sheet. There are two sheets that have different kind of foiling. This one has this sort of camouflage pattern, and there's another one that has a triangular style of pattern, and they're thicker than normal Magic cardstock. Since this is the only sheet like this, each of these cards is the only one exactly like this in the world. This test print sheet remained intact from when it was made in 1998 until around 2014, when the owner decided to cut it up into individual cards. Here's a closer look at the survival of the fittest from row 1 and the mana breach from row 3. In this picture, you can see that the survival of the fittest card name is uniformly white colored, but the mana breach has bright spots and dark spots, and that's because that card name is not white, it is in fact foil, and the light and the dark matches the foiling underneath. You can also see that foiling effect behind the colorless casting cost, whereas on the survival of the fittest, it's more of a solid color. Now that we're through the introduction, here's the moment you've all been waiting for, a better look at the cards. So, you can really see the way the light reflects off of this card here. Just sort of lights up. I'm going to take my time moving the card around and getting the light just right so you can just really see how beautiful the card is. The artwork, when it's not foiled on this, has a lot of depth. It just feels like it's inset into the card there. Now this card is also from row 3, so it has the card name there is pretty hard to see. That's because it's foiled. So that number over on the right-hand margin, you can kind of see it here in this picture. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that for a minute. So that +1 and -1, they're an indicator of the dot gain adjustment as far as I know. You can think of dot gain like ink bleed. It's how much each tiny little dot of ink grows after being applied to the card. If the ink dots grow too much, they can overlap neighboring ink dots and result in oversaturation. If there isn't enough dot gain, the card will appear lighter in color, like there wasn't enough ink applied. They have to factor in dot gain during pre-production. Dot gain is also affected by the speed of the press, because less ink gets picked up at higher speeds, and by temperature, which affects the viscosity of the ink or how easily it flows outward from the center point. These physical factors sometimes make test prints necessary. It's one reason why the final printed product doesn't always look like the original image on the computer screen. Dot gain is different on a foil versus a non-foil because the surfaces are different in texture and porosity. This is the reason that test prints were needed. The foil is visible in the unprinted space between the dots of ink, so higher dot gain makes the foil less visible, and lower dot gain makes the foil more visible. Several different settings were tested in order to achieve the look they desired, and that's why you see the rows that have the -1, the +1, and the 1. So I don't have a whole lot more to say on this topic for the rest of the video. I might have something to say here and there, but don't think your computer's broken or your sound went out or anything like that. Just kind of enjoy the pictures here. On these full foil cards like that, it can be really difficult to read the cards sometimes, and that's one of the reasons they chose not to foil the text box. See, there's one where the art's foiled and the text box is not. The black cards just don't seem as vibrant as the other colors. This blue card looks amazing in person. I took my time and went nice and slow on this one. The foil pattern repeats every 3/4 of an inch. You can kind of see the squares here in this. They overlap each other like bricks. It's not really a grid, they're staggered. In the right light, it just sort of lights up like blue fire. And in the wrong light, it's really hard to see anything on the card at all. This sheet has white card backs. Makes it pretty easy to identify, along with the unique foiling there. Another video of the same card here, just a little clip. There aren't too many Foil Visions cards out there. Just the Pygmy Hippo. Now this is one of the cards made from the unprinted space at the edge of the sheet. This is where more cards could have been, and it gives you a good look at the foil without any of the ink in the way. And there's a scan. That's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed this look at these one-of-a-kind cards.